All right, what's going on, everybody? My name is Andrew Golden, and I'm the director of Medill on the Wildcat Welcome Board of Directors. One of the weekly series that we're going to be doing for 30 Days Northwestern is NYou, which is a chance for incoming students to hear from a panel of current students as they talk about their Northwestern experiences on a variety of topics. But this is the first webinar we're going to be doing in the series. It's all about transfers. So before we get started, we just wanted to say that the purpose of this panel is to give you an opportunity to hear from current students as they talk about how they've navigated their first year at Northwestern, and a few things that they consider during the process. This won't be the space to discuss or learn about the intricacies of how campus might look different due to health or safety guidelines this fall. Our PAs know nothing about that, and I personally know nothing about that. But you can tune into tomorrow's webinar from the university when they discuss the student experience and the connection to health and safety guidelines. And you can register for that and access that webinar from the Northwestern homepage. But with that being said, we're fortunate enough to have 6 current students who transferred from Northwestern a year or two ago, who also serve as peer advisors participate in this. And I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Radhika. I'm a rising 4th year in the Weinberg College of Arts and Sciences. I'm studying economics and psychology, as well as pursuing a certificate in integrated marketing communications through Medill, and I transferred from Loyola University Chicago 2 years ago.
Hi everyone, I'm Curtis DeBishop. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm originally from Quincy, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. I am in the School of Education and Social Policy, studying human development and psychological services. I have a minor in music in Beaman, and I transferred from the University of Massachusetts at Boston 2 years ago. So I'm a rising 4th year.
Hi, my name is Izzy. I am a rising 3rd year. I'm a computer science major in Weinberg, and I'm pursuing a design certificate, and I think I'm technically a dance minor. And I transferred from Wake Forest.
Hey everyone, I'm Evan Oxner. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a rising 4th year in Medill studying journalism, and then I'm also minoring in political science and environmental policy. I transferred from the University of Missouri after 1 year there, but I'm originally from Colorado.
Hi everyone, I'm Sindhu. I'm a rising 4th year in Weinberg studying psychology and biology on the pre-med track. And I transferred into Northwestern 2 years ago, my sophomore year, from Northeastern in Boston. And I'm originally from Westford, Massachusetts.
Hi, my name is Jenna. I use she, her pronouns. I'm studying journalism and legal studies in the double major. I transferred from University of Denver, and I'm originally from Colorado too.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys for introducing yourselves. So the way this is going to work, it's going to be a Q&A where I ask you guys some questions for the first 20 or 30 minutes. And then after that, we're going to open it up to questions in the chat box on YouTube. So if you guys have any questions that come up that you might have, definitely type them in the chat box on the side, and we'll be happy to answer them. But what I'm going to start with, we're going to talk about academics first, kind of that transition. So coming to Northwestern, you guys have already experienced a first year at a different institution. From your first year at Northwestern, what differences did you find in the academic transition that were surprising or challenging to navigate?
For me personally, the university I transferred from, it was more like lecture halls, and it was less like engagement with the students and the teachers. So I think that was a transition I had to make of like learning how to like actively speak in class and engage. But other than that, the academic transition was a lot easier than I was expecting it to be, because you already know how to do the basic college classes and everything. So that was one of the easier parts for me to adjust to.
I want to second that. I feel like a lot of times we talk about the quarter system as being this rough transition, but that really didn't happen for me. The biggest thing I had to change about the way I approach academics was just my mindset. I think Northwestern is a very stimulating place, especially the social sciences. You have to talk a lot and constantly be reframing how you're approaching situation. So just really taking a step back and like reevaluating how I thought about school and thought about the world around me.
I think something that wasn't challenging so much as just different was my previous school had a pretty structured core curriculum. So there were a lot of classes that a lot of first years were all taking together, and even that like went through to your second year. So switching to Northwestern, there's a lot more freedom in that sense. And I thought it was actually really great to be able to have more of a freedom to pick the classes, but it is definitely different being in such a different number of classes from your like peers.
Yeah, I want to follow something that you guys both touched, that all of you guys have touched on, and a little bit about like the transition from a semester to a quarter system. So the experiences that you had and the way you structured yourself at your last institution kind of feed into how you set yourself up at Northwestern. For those that came from a semester school, how did the quarter system change the way you perceived and the way you moved through college?
I think for me, I feel like at my old school, I was just taking classes because I had to take them. But with the quarter system, I had a lot more time to take, just like classes that I wanted to take. And I feel like I was able to learn just because I wanted to learn things. Like I took a screenwriting class, which is not part of my curriculum, and that was fun.
It's definitely a quicker pace. I transferred from a semester school, so I went from having a 16-week semester to 10-week quarters, and it definitely was quicker academically, but that's something that I got used to super, super quickly. Just kind of fell into the groove of getting used to what a quarter's like. It's definitely faster. I think sometimes it's maybe made out to be more than it is as far as how fast it is, because like, you still have midterms but you do at any place and still just move through it kind of and get used to the pacing. So I didn't find the adjustment to be that hard, but it certainly was noticeable.
Yeah, kind of adding on to that, I think one thing I really learned how to do at Northwestern was like balance and prioritize. So there are some classes that are a little bit more time consuming and challenging, and I learned how to balance those with classes that weren't so much. And I think like working with your advisors and talking to upperclassmen is a great way to go about navigating that, because as new students, you don't really know what's going to be more time consuming. So I definitely work a lot more with my advisors and with upperclassmen than I did at my previous institution.
Listen, you transitioned right into a question I was about to ask, and like, obviously Northwestern's a tough transition, but like, what did you find was helpful for you as you navigated a different landscape at Northwestern? What resources or guides did you lean on that helped you support or help you understand the differences between the schools? So Cindy, you obviously touched on your academic advisors, like what else did you do in terms of like, what else did you guys do in terms of how you were supported throughout this process?
Peer guided study groups are super helpful. If any of your classes offer them and it fits into your schedule, I would definitely recommend it, because one of the easiest ways to get adjusted is to hear it from a peer who's already been through it. And so that's exactly what you get is a peer guided study group, is someone who already took that class and already excelled in it. And so I think it's super helpful to just get that straight from the source and find someone who went through the exact same process, because that really helps the transition.
I think it's important to note that the transfer community itself is very, very cohesive and like really well knit. So I think for me personally, having a group of people who all are kind of going through a somewhat similar thing relative to the rest of the university was really helpful to feel adjusted and to feel like heard. And then from that, you can kind of expand out and find other resources, like, talking to one person who might have used, X office or X individual to help them with their transition, and then another person did Y. And it just really builds from the network that Northwestern provides through transfers.
Personally, I benefited from just transferring from a big state school where every class was a lot bigger. Here, I just found, resources were easier to access. I found my professors to be more approachable and TAs to be more approachable because of that. And I felt like I benefited from the small class sizes because yes, the academics were a step up, but I think anyone who's transferring to Northwestern is looking for that. And I think for most of us, we find the transition really isn't, anything we can't handle, and of course it's not. So, I mean, for me personally, just having that access to teachers and teaching assistants, I think went a long way.
And there's one question I want to ask you guys too. This obviously isn't related to necessarily transfers, but just kind of in general, you guys obviously had to deal with, or doing classes online in the spring. What advice would you give to people who are taking classes in the spring who maybe haven't done it before, or their high school is a little bit different of an experience?
For me, it was really helpful to go like to office hour sessions online and like to talk to TAs or peer mentors. And just because of my major, a lot of my classes are like really, really big. So it's always really helpful to go to office hours and to form relationships with professors that way.
Something that really helped me with online classes was like creating a schedule for myself, even though I didn't really have one. Like I would wake up at a certain time or I would work out in a certain time. So that way it was like more structured, which it would have been if I was at Northwestern. And that just helped me like motivate myself to just do the work because I know I struggle with that like at home and doing online classes.
I think going off of that, also, if you have the opportunity to not take classes on your bed and also to just like get changed for class, I think just like the little things really help and make it feel really different. And so even if like all you're doing is like putting on a shirt or like switching out of your sweatpants, just like the smallest thing will help it feel more like you're in an academic setting and help you focus more.
Yeah, for sure. And we also just got a question in the chat, and that question was, do you feel pressed for time to finish your courses in 3 years as opposed to 4 as a transfer?
This might be a unique situation, but I talked to my advisor today and he was talking about how like if I wanted to, I could take a quarter off because I'm like so far ahead. And I know that a lot of my other friends have similar situations, but that might be like Medill related or something else. But I know most of my friends don't struggle to finish in 3 years.
Yeah, I think the situation's a little, I think the situation's a little bit different depending on what your major is, but I switched majors from my last school. I used to be a music major and now I'm in, sorry, someone just screamed near me. I don't know if that got picked up. I was a music major at my first school and I switched to a social sciences major. So very, very different things, but I'm still on track to graduate ahead of time. I'm taking 3 classes a quarter. If there is a lot of flexibility in it and I haven't really met anyone that's struggling at all.
Yeah, just echoing that. I think because we're on a quarter system, we have the luxury of being able to take a lot of classes. So you have a lot more flexibility there. And I've been able to have quarters where I've just taken 3 classes like Curtis have, and I have also had quarters where I've taken like 5. So you have as much flexibility as you want with classes and stuff. And like, it's really not an issue of being rushed or anything like that.
Just really quickly to add to that, even with like 2 majors and a certificate, like there is not a single quarter where I have to take 5 classes if I don't want to. So you definitely have a lot of space and you won't feel like you have to put in more work than you need to.
I forgot I was on mute. Okay, and one more question I just want to ask for fun. What's your favorite class that you've taken at Northwestern? I know it's hard. There's a lot.
I said this before, but I took a screenwriting class and it was so fun. And I'm a computer science major and it's like really not part of it, but like I highly recommend it. It's RTVF 260.
I took psychology of beauty, which was just so interesting and so much fun. And that professor is one of my favorite people in the world. And so I think it was just such an interesting class to be able to take.
One of my literature and fine arts distribution classes that I took was called Arabian Nights, and that's so outside of my major, but I thought it was so cool, and it was one of the best classes I've ever taken. So definitely explore outside of your major.
For my history distro, I took a class on Prague in the Czech Republic, totally outside of my realm. I'm not into history. I'm not really into that side of the world, but it was amazing. It was taught by Martina Krylova, I believe. You examine different books through a historical lens and talk about like identity transitions. It was fantastic. Highly recommend.
I took philosophy of race and racism, and that was one of my favorite classes by far. It was so interesting.
I'm going to cheat and use Medill on the Hill, which is the Washington reporting course. And I don't even know if anyone in this is in Medill, but I would just encourage people to take advantage of those programs in whatever academic school you're in. I know for me as a transfer, I wasn't thrilled about leaving campus. And I know that we're all on virtual. Like now we're all just going to be excited to be on campus. But I was totally worth it to take advantage of a Northwestern program that was in Washington, D.C. I got to see a lot of really cool stuff. So no matter what your major is, I would, and once this all clears up and if you feel safe, definitely encourage people to take advantage of those programs.
We also got another question, which was, can you talk more about certificates and how they work? So Riley, could you talk a little bit about your certificate? Do you want to like continue on about, your certificate and how you did that and how you're doing that?
Yeah, so my certificate is one of the many offered. It's a certificate is smaller than a minor. So minors are typically around 8 courses and certificates tend to be around anywhere between 4 to 6. And there's a lot offered, but the one I'm doing is integrated marketing communications, and that's offered through the Medill School of Journalism. And what I've seen for most certificate programs, how it works is after a quarter or so on campus, you've typically filled the prereqs that you can find online for all of them, and you have to apply into the certificate, but it's pretty much just like a process to make sure that you've completed all of the requirements to get into the program. It's not something where they're really looking for anything in particular, and there's not really a chance that you won't get into the certificate program you're applying for. So it's a pretty simple process to just like apply. And then once you're in, you can also pre-register for certificates the way you would for any majors or minors.
So I'm pursuing the certificate, and like I can get, I think, almost half of it done through my major, because I think a lot of them have like 3 courses you have to take and then like 3 electives. So it just worked out for me that a lot of them are in my major, and it's like not going to be that many courses to finish.
Okay, cool. I think we covered the certificates for the most part. So I think we're going to try to transition a little to more just towards social life and what that's been like. A lot of transfer students have been asking how they build that kind of foundational network at Northwestern. What was your own personal experience and how you went about building your network? And if you could have done anything differently, what would you have done differently?
I think like Curtis said earlier, transfers are a really good network amongst themselves. One of the things that I actually did with a friend during Wildcat Welcome was we went around and everyone that wasn't wearing a class of 22 shirt, which was like the 4 years that would have been at Northwestern, we just kind of talked to them and we were like, hey, your transfers were transfers too. And people like actually got really excited to talk. So that was really nice. And then outside of that, I think just talking to people in class is not something everyone considers, but I've met a lot of people through classes. And so I think just like being willing to take that step, even if it feels a little awkward, but it's like if you've noticed you and someone else sit in like a similar spot every time, or even just like on Zoom, I met people in classes because we've worked on projects together. We've been assigned to breakout rooms. And so I think just it feels a little awkward, but being willing to embrace that awkwardness and just like reach out to people and say, hey, if you've seen them in multiple spaces is really helpful.
I also leaned on my PA group a lot during my transition. I think that since you guys are generally like split up by major, you guys have a lot in common already. Like you're probably taking the same classes, or you're studying the same thing, or you might be like interested in the same thing. So you guys have a lot in common already. And so I would definitely take advantage of that.
I like my best friends to this day were like my neighbors. And, like I lived in this building that was all singles. It's Foster Walker Complex Plex, like no one wants to live there. But like it was kind of a fun time, and I like was super awkward about it, and I was like, hi, and like now they're my best friends. So I don't know. It's like I feel like you can just make friends with the people around you. And I also like became friends with some freshmen. I don't know if that's like weird, but like it's fun.
Addressing the what would you do differently portion of that question, I think my first year experience was full of what I would do differently. And so something I came into Northwestern with a lot of expectations. My original university didn't have a campus. It was all commuting students. So I was like, all right, I'm here to make friends. I'm here to build my social network, whatever it was. And I had a lot of like goals that I like was like planning out my days about how I'm going to meet people, how I'm going to do this, how I'm going to do that, cramming too much into too small amount of time, and it backfired. I think the best way to make friends is to not be too hard on yourself and to not say, I want to meet this kind of person. I want to meet this many people. I want to meet them in this way. Just kind of like Veronica was saying, like meet people in your class, meet people when, walk up to people on the street and talk to them. Like take every opportunity you have to meet people in a natural way rather than forcing it through your expectations.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what you said, Curtis. The difference between my old school and Northwestern was just night and day as far as like how friendly people were and how willing I found people to talk. Like at football games here, I'll just like turn around and just talk to the person next to me and start a conversation with them. And I don't know, I just find that it's super easy to just kind of form those like natural connections that can develop into friendships. And then if nothing else, are just like people you still say hey to walking across campus. And then also like emphasizing Curtis's point about like not stressing yourself out about like, getting overly involved in stuff, but like choosing stuff that you're passionate in to get involved with, stuff you actually care about. That's how you're going to find people who have the same interests as you and are passionate about the same things. And I found that to be an effective way to make a social network as well.
Yeah, just to like echo, especially like Curtis and Evan said, like really give yourself credit for like everything you do, because it's difficult to transfer, and don't focus all your energy on one thing. Because I think I found myself doing that, of trying to like make my life all about that one thing. And looking back, I would have tried to expand that network, kind of like what Curtis and Evan were talking about. So yeah, just give yourself credit for just being a transfer.
There's a lot of great advice, but and one thing you guys talked about is, as you think about, your next year after your first year being a transfer, like, your future, did you find like it was more challenging than your first year? Did you feel like you became more comfortable as time went on? And again, if so, like, what would you have done differently moving forward? You guys touched a little bit on that already, but.
Personally, my junior year was a lot easier to make friends. I don't know why that was, but I just felt more comfortable in the space. I think no matter who's coming to Northwestern, but especially transfer students, there's a lot of doubt in yourself. You kind of like think that you feel different in the school. You might not deserve to be there, but that's not true, of course, because you're there and you have every right to be there. So once I kind of overcame that imposter syndrome, junior year felt a lot easier. I felt more confident in reaching out to people I had brief connections with. There's a lot of people I met my first year who I hung out with maybe once or twice, or met through, a friend of a friend, and didn't follow through with it all. In junior year, I felt more comfortable, more deserving, and I reached out and was able to build more thorough relationships than I had previously.
I think going off of that, you do just feel a lot more comfortable once you've been at Northwestern longer. And I think there's still like, it can be a little challenging, because when you enter in as a first year, you're with other first years who are younger than you, and you might like connect on all of you being first years. But then kind of as you keep going through Northwestern, you do want to meet more people your age and your year. And it can still feel like you're kind of like trying to break into like friend groups that have already been established and already been there. But I think one thing that is really important to remember that Evan said is that like people at Northwestern are always willing to talk to you and hang out. And like you will make friends every quarter. Like you will meet new people and make new friends. And I know people who have like now graduated who said that they met some of their best friends like spring quarter senior year. And so there's never really a time limit on it. And people are always willing to talk to you. So don't feel as if you're trying to enter a space or a friend group that you like shouldn't be a part of just because you weren't there from the very beginning.
Yeah, when I'm going into my junior year, so I'm not like returning, but I do think that it was a much harder transition than I was expecting, than if I was a freshman. That being said, I just want to echo what we said earlier of like, don't like have goals for yourself. Don't like set a timeline on it. It's like it's your own transition, your own experience, and it's no one else's. So just be okay with that and don't put pressure on yourself to make it the like perfect year, the perfect experience.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring up another question, and this is more about obviously like there's organizations on campus like the transfer student organization, and they kind of help to make that transition for transfer students easier as well. Have any of you guys been involved in that? What's that experience been like? And is that something you recommend to transfers?
Yes, so I have been very involved in that, and Curtis has as well, and I would definitely recommend this organization. We're like a brand new organization on campus, like we started a few years ago, but I think that the reason we gained so much traction so quickly is because transfers have like such a like kinship. Like I've been able to bond and like make friends with transfers who are completely different from me just because we're both transfers, and so we know we have a lot of common ground even if we're like completely different people. And transfer student organizations just like filled with people like that. So, and everyone wants to meet each other, and everyone's like genuinely excited about being a transfer and being at Northwestern. So you get to be around people like that in that kind of environment, and it's great. And I would definitely recommend being a part of it. And the only requirement for membership is being a transfer. So you guys are all like already a part of it, technically.
I'm not involved with that organization at all, but I just wanted to echo what Cindy said because I think that it's really just important to remember that transfers are like so willing to be friends, and like even though a lot of transfers are really different, I feel like we share a common ground of like having a maturity of realizing that your first school wasn't like what you wanted, and making the choice to leave. And I think that is something that bonds a lot of transfers.
Cool. I think that sounds good. And I'm looking in the chat and I see a question about if I have any insider news on how the fall will look. Unfortunately, I am a student. I did not have that information, but there will be a webinar tomorrow. We kind of referenced this earlier at the beginning of the call, but just want to reiterate the fact that there will be a webinar that the university is going to be doing tomorrow about the student experience and how things will look. So unfortunately, I cannot answer that question for you, but definitely tune into that webinar to find out more information. But what we're going to do is transition to another topic about housing. You guys touched on it a little bit, but just like a general first question, what was the most important item that you guys had in your room freshman year, or your first year at Northwestern, and why? Not your freshman year.
I think pictures were my most important. If you've already lived in a dorm at your previous institution, you recognize that there's not a lot happening in those rooms, and they're all pretty bland, regardless of how nice the building you're living in may be. And so I think having like pictures and memories up is always just a great way to make the space feel more like your own, because you won't be spending like a lot of time in your dorm room typically, but you'll still be in there often enough. So just making it feel like your space always really helped me.
Yeah, on that point, I'm not much of like a homebody. I was never in my dorm, but I made it a point to put up things that were like unique and special to me personally, like, on a more like deeper level. Just for myself to like enjoy the space I was in, to make it my own, but also to like kind of start conversations. Whenever I was in my room, I try to have my door open and like let people come in, or especially at the beginning of the year, it was a great way to meet people on my floor. And having something on the wall that kind of reflected who I was, and having the ability for someone to walk in and be like, oh, what is that? Can you tell me about that? Tell me about yourself through this piece of art or whatever it is, was really, really beneficial to me.
Mine's a lot more shallow, but I had the comfiest mattress topper ever. And so I always just slept perfectly. And my nightlight, because my roommate was always asleep, so I always had to turn it on to get around the room. So those were my two things.
One thing that I don't have, but I wish I had, and a lot of people like recommended it to me, was like a happy lamp or like a vitamin D lamp, just because Chicago gets really gloomy in the wintertime and it's really cold. And sometimes like you don't have the motivation to go outside just because it is so cold. It's not that bad and you'll get used to it, but it is cold and it is a little gloomy. So I would recommend getting one of these. I don't think they're super expensive, and they're also on loan at CAPS. So definitely utilize that. And yeah, I think it'll just give you a better time overall winter quarter.
Cool. Sounds like we got a lot of variety, the big things and the little things like a mattress topper. So another question I have, in terms of dorms, if you weren't placed into a building you necessarily wanted to be in, how did that impact your first year? And what advice would you have for how to deal with that?
So I said this before, but I lived in Plex, which is like where no one wants to live because I think it was designed by like a prison designer, and it's like really confusing and it's like all zigzaggy and like weird. And all of the rooms are single, so I feel like a lot of people think that they won't make friends. But it was actually really fun, and I think I just like made the most of it. And like there was a dining hall downstairs that had like good food sometimes, and like I just made friends with my neighbors. And like it wasn't ideal because it is a weird building, but I think if you just decide that you want to make it fun for yourself, it can be.
I was also in a dorm that I didn't choose, and I actually didn't even know about until I got to Northwestern, or I got assigned the housing. And I didn't want to be there on my first day, but I made the most of it. And like I've met some great people. Like I like became friends with a lot of my neighbors and like my suite mates, because it was a suite style dorm. It was West Fairchild. And I actually ended up really liking it, even though the facilities weren't like the best. It was still a good time, and you just got to make the most of it.
Yeah, I lived actually like a couple of doors down from Sindhu. So she's talking about me when she said friends. But I think really the advice that like you can give for any space is really just make the most of it. I think like we said earlier, like you probably won't be in the building a lot, and the facilities might not be the best, but I would say like try not to let that impact your experience, because I think there's so much other stuff going on outside of your dorm that's happening at Northwestern that you can be a part of that will definitely be a larger part of your Northwestern experience than the building that you're living in. And even if you don't love the building, you will still find people that are super cool that are living in there in every single building. I can promise you that. So I think just like make the most of it in the sense of like look for the people and not the space itself.
Also, I think there aren't really any dorms on campus that are like objectively bad, right? I was in East Fairchild, which is across from West Fairchild, so there's a theme in this group. And I was pretty bummed to move in my first day. I knew nothing about it. I was kind of scared for what it held, but as everyone was saying, like, yeah, it's the people that make the dorm special, but also like there are some aspects of dorms across the board that are just different, right? And like some of those are good and some of those are bad. So you could be in this brand new, nice, gorgeous dorm, but maybe there's something about that you don't like. For me personally, East Fairchild, it was right in the center of campus. I had access to like anything. I could walk downtown, I could walk up north, I could walk anywhere in campus in like 10 minutes. And that really granted me more opportunities to like go out and see things and do more social activities I wouldn't have done if I was living 20 minutes away from campus.
One thing I just want to draw attention to is that like living in the dorms as a non first year student at Northwestern like was something that I was worried about. Like, if you transfer somewhere else, like you don't want to be like the only sophomore living with a bunch of freshmen. But at Northwestern, because of like the live-in requirements, you are living with a lot of people who are your same year, which I think is really, really cool. And my dorm I lived in a really small dorm on South Campus that only had like 70 people in it, but there were like 10 transfers in that dorm. So I got to meet a lot of transfers through my dorm as well, which was really neat, and meet a lot of other people who were my year, and it wasn't just people who were the year below me. So I think that sort of aspect of Northwestern and its housing kind of played into the benefit of me.
Cool. Another question I want to ask you guys is like thinking about, if you guys had roommates, what advice would you what advice would you give about, having a roommate?
So my freshman year, me and my roommate were like best friends and we still like talk and everything. But then I transferred, I also had a roommate and I was really excited. But we didn't end up being the best of friends, which is fine. But if anything, like it kind of pushed me out of my comfort zone because my freshman year, me and my roommate would just do everything together. And so I always had that boundary. But having to do it all by myself when I transferred was really different, and it honestly made me grow a lot, and it just like taught me how to deal with someone who just like don't get along with but have to. So even if you don't love your roommate, it's going to be fine, but it could be good. So either way, it's gonna be fine.
I looked out and my roommate actually ended up also being a transfer, which I think was super helpful to have. But pretty much like Jenna said, like first year at my old school, I was best friends with my roommate. And then getting to Northwestern, I wasn't. And it just, you do like learn a lot about yourself through that experience and kind of just like the type of person you are and the type of person that you can live with, which really helps for when you eventually like move off campus and pick your own roommates, or even if you stay on campus and want to look for new roommates. So I think just take it as a learning process, even if it isn't the best experience. But if you can even find like one thing to bond with your roommate on so that things aren't just uncomfortable in the room all the time, I would definitely recommend doing that.
I kind of had an opposite experience. Like my first year, my roommate, I don't know. It's not that we just like we were friends, but I guess like I'm a really deep sleeper and she's a really light sleeper, and I also like wake up early. So like my alarm would wake her up, and like she started to like passive aggressively like build up anger at me about it, and I like didn't even realize she was mad at me. So I guess I would just recommend being super honest with your roommate, because like we didn't have that. So she was like resenting me all the time, and like I literally didn't even know. But it also just like I think someone else said this, I think Jenna said this, it just led me to spend a lot of time outside my room and like meet a lot of different people, and that ended up being positive for me. So
My roommate rode crew, so he got up at 5 a.m. every morning and went to bed at 9 p.m., which means that some nights I hadn't even started my work yet, and I would come in to start my work and he would be asleep. So from that, I mean, it's just like learning to be considerate, just be considerate. I didn't, I always just kind of, I knew when he was going to be in bed and trying to sleep, and I would just try to, stay out of the way and go study somewhere else. I never really study in the room anyway, but I think just that goes a long way. Just showing a little bit of, I guess, decency to your roommate, and being accommodating like that can, I think, make a big difference.
I think one thing that's really important to do is to just like have a conversation about boundaries, like right when you get to your dorm, or like maybe like after a week or so, so that like what you each like want from that space, and like if you wake up early, or if you're neat or messy, or you have any like restrictions or anything like that, just like put it out all out in the open so that there isn't like any tension or anything later. Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to go. I actually haven't had a roommate because I was in a single my sophomore year, and my roommate at my old school dropped out on the 5th day of school. So yeah, this is just from anecdotal.
Okay, I think we got a lot of good advice on roommates here. I think what we're gonna do is wrap it up. But what I'm gonna allow is like another minute or so for people to ask questions in the chat if they have any. But while we're doing that, I want to ask you guys, like, just like more generally, is there anything additionally that you guys want to add about, your experience, about the larger first year experience at Northwestern as a transfer? Any other advice that you didn't get to cover that you would have?
Super vague, but just enjoy it. I'm really like, stuck on the theme of expectations, but like being a transfer is a really fun, unique thing, and the community is great, and you have a very special outlook on how you approach Northwestern that other students don't have. It's really realistic and mature. I think as you were saying that earlier. It's fantastic. Just make the most out of it. And I think it was also Cindy or someone else said that it's like your experience, you know, like make it your own. It's not anyone else's. Just go with it. Don't be too hard on yourself.
I think this was kind of said, but like being a transfer is really hard sometimes. And I think it is like really important to give yourself credit and to recognize that you're doing something, really good for yourself. You're choosing a school that is a much better fit for you, and that there are a lot of people there to support you, like your PA and other transfers. But yeah, I think it ended up being a lot harder than I thought it would be, but it all works out.
I think also like don't stress that you only have limited time left. I know when I first got there, I was freaking out because I was like, I only have 3 years and I want college to like kind of last forever, which it doesn't. But now that I'm in it, like I know that it's like gonna be okay, whatever. And I'm just making the most of it and just having fun. And I'm not stressing like every single day about how much time I have left.
I think, okay, I don't know how to say this without it sounding kind of bad, but don't be afraid to pull the transfer card. Like, feel free to tell people that you are transfer students and professors, because one with like professors, like it is a transition. Like, even if you adjust to the quarter system pretty quickly, it's still different, and they will be understanding if you explain to them that, like, I understand that I'm like technically a second or third year, but I did just transfer here. And then also feel free to tell people, because typically they think it's like cool. Like, no one's going to judge you for not having started here from the very first year of college. And they'll actually probably want to hear more about it. I'm entering my 4th year and I still kind of start every conversation with, oh, I'm a transfer, even though I've been at Northwestern longer than I was at my previous institution at this point. So I think just like embrace that part of your identity.
I just want to say one more thing about like academics and social life. And the academics point for me was something I was really stressed about. I thought it would be too hard, but like I talked to an admissions or one of our advisors, and I was like, "Did you guys make a mistake letting me in?" And the advisor said, "Our admissions department doesn't make mistakes." And so like everyone who's here deserves to be here. And to get into Northwestern as a transfer, you have to work hard at your old school, and you had to work hard in high school. So I mean, as long as you keep applying yourself, you're gonna do fine. And then on the social point, I know I was really nervous about breaking in and making friends and stuff. But I hope as like people have heard throughout this is that like people at Northwestern like genuinely are just good people in my experience, and like are willing to talk to you, and like are always friendly and willing to make those connections. And they're not gonna be like, oh, you're a year older than me or a year younger than me, and therefore like they're not gonna talk to you. Like that's just not how it works. And you're gonna make those connections. And I recognize that it's difficult with with this online element and stuff, but I think everyone's in the same boat and is going to be anxious to make those connections, and transfers are no different.
I think another really important thing that I had to learn throughout my time at Northwestern was to like just be easy on myself and to not like beat myself up over everything. I think that like Northwestern students are so ambitious and like so involved in everything. And we have this saying that's like, and is in our DNA, which is like reflective of like how like involved and like passionate people are. But at the same time, like don't let that culture like really get to you too much. Like you don't want to over involve in stuff just for the sake of like being really involved. So don't do that. And also like if your grades aren't like as good as they were at your previous institution, mine aren't, like don't let that affect you. Like you're doing your best and that's all you need to do. So yeah.
It was all great advice. We also have one more question, which is how much time did you spend on clubs and how much time did you balance between clubs and extracurriculars and academics?
I think that really depends. I think like Sindhu said, like don't get over involved. I personally spend I spend a lot of time for my clubs, but that's because I've really narrowed my focus down to the clubs that I care about a lot and the ones that I'm super passionate about instead of just being involved in multiple different things. So I find that once you have that and once you're a part of the things that you really care about, you'll find a natural balance. Don't force one either. Definitely don't like find yourself spending like too much time on a club and ignoring things for classes. But if you're really in things that you like genuinely care about, you will probably strike a natural balance between those in your classes because you'll enjoy doing things for your clubs and you'll recognize the importance, if not enjoy the things that you're doing for class.
I think I might be the odd one out, not just in this group, but in Northwestern and generally. I don't do clubs. I've joined several of them and they just didn't fit. And it really stressed me out because there is an expectation at Northwestern to do clubs and be active in things. But a couple of weeks ago, I was having a conversation with a friend who goes to a school in upstate New York, really tiny. I was explaining to him my kind of concerns, like, I don't feel like I'm doing enough. Like, everyone I know is in 4 clubs and whatever, and I'm not doing that. And he straight up looked at me in the eye and says, I don't know what you mean. What's a club? He had never in his college experience done a club. They don't have him in the school. No one does it. And so there is a great expectation, but you got to take a step back and realize like, maybe that's not what you want to do, right? If you don't want to do a club, don't force yourself to do a club. I definitely felt like I was being not forced, but I was forcing myself to do it and I didn't enjoy it. I instead focused my time as a working student and I work 20 hours a week and I spend the rest of the time in class and with friends. There are other ways to make friends that aren't clubs. And if something doesn't fit, don't stress out too much about it.
Agree 100% with what Curtis said. I think it's just important to remember that there's no right way to do college as much as like everyone back home wants to convince you that there is. And, if you want to spend like 20 hours a week with one club you're super passionate about, like that's amazing. That's great. But if you want to spend like 20 hours a week just watching Netflix with your friends after class, that's also great and like equally as valid. And it's your college experience. It's your transfer experience. So yeah, just 100% agree with what Curtis said.
So I just wanted to echo what Evan said because like I feel like my first quarter I was like I'm so behind because I'm a transfer and I like took 5 classes and like did all these things and I just got so burnt out. And like my second quarter only took 2 classes because I was just so still like exhausted from fall quarter. So I think it's like really important to make time for yourself even when you think you should like be doing clubs and stuff. Like I don't really do any clubs either. Like I'm in like one maybe. And, like I think it's just really important to make time for yourself.
Yeah, I'm only in one club too. And I really found like my social life kind of became like that club. Like I was still just as busy as other clubs and I was like a work study student. So I was like, I was on the move constantly. Like I was still just as busy. So like, and you're still gonna have just as much fun, but it's just like depends on how you fill your free time. So yeah, there's no pressure to do like 7 clubs.
Cool. I think that wraps up. I don't think I see any other questions, but thank you guys for taking the time to talk today out of your day, and I really appreciate it. And I guess we're gonna move on to the other one about the first year experience for first years, and that'll be another like half an hour or so. But thank you guys for coming on and talking to us. They really appreciate it.